the Olympus OM-10. The OM-10's twin electronic brains give you foolproof, automatic performance every time. It's light, compact, and easy to use, loaded with advanced features, and yours at Shutan for only $219.95.
Today I'm going to be talking about this OM-10 Olympus SLR camera. Now, I haven't had this for very long, but I really enjoy it. To me, it's almost like an interchangeable lens point and shoot. It is essentially Olympus's effort at pricing down their OM1 or OM single digit range to try and sell their Olympus lenses to a more consumer market. As you saw in that clip in the intro, they were selling for $219 back in 1981. I did some maths and I found this internet conversion that shows that it's about $620 in today's money. So a lot less expensive than the Pro range. They took some of the features out. There's a lot less metal in the construction. It doesn't have a shutter speed dial. It doesn't have mirror lockup mode, but at the same time, it's a fantastic camera. It's got the same great Olympus metering, and it's one of those cameras that you can just treat as a focus ring and a shutter. Some people complain that they want a fully manual camera and that they need to have complete control over your shutter speed, aperture, all that stuff. But when you're shooting film, you only have those two variables. You load your film and you have your ISO locked in camera. So if you are one of those people that says, I need to do this all by hand, buy one of the adapters. They fit in here and you can use your shutter speed. But if not, just use the aperture priority, because you'll think every single pair of aperture and shutter speed values will be locked at 1 EV. So if you have an exposure that allows you to do, let's just try this now. If I turn my meter on, 1/60th at 2.8, you know it's going to be a 125 at 1.8 or a 1/30th at f4. I mean, you could go further. I mean, you could shoot at f16, but if you want a specific shutter speed, you can just look in the viewfinder and turn your aperture ring till it pops up on the left. It's not something I think about too much. I treat this camera like, like a point and shoot, and it works really well for it. I'll do a quick rundown of the features. Now, you get most of your settings and controls from this dial here. If I just move that out of the way. So what we have is your ISO, which obviously you set based on your film. You also use this for exposure compensation. And what you can do is you can tell the camera you have a stop above, a stop below, or 2 stops either way. I mean, even 3 stops either way if you're really going for it. And in that way, you can use exposure compensation as you would on any other camera. If I just quickly sub in this M rangefinder, that's how exposure compensation works on these as well. You just change the ISO to a stop above or a stop below. Also on this dial, you have your modes, and you have the manual adapter, which is what you use when the little adapter plug is in here. You have bulb mode, which you'd only really use if you're going to do long exposures, as well as auto. The manual adapter mode, although I don't have a manual adapter on this camera, is pretty useful as well because it defaults to 1/60th of a second. And that means that whilst the manual adapter is selected, you're able to use flash, and it will automatically give you a 1/60th shutter, which is the sync speed. On the left of the camera, you have your rewind knob. You have a self timer, which is 12 seconds, and then a shutter. I can do that now, but it's 12 seconds, so let's give that a go. It beeps on the front and it gives you that red light, so you know that it's trying to take the picture. If I hold that for another few seconds. Okay, and you also have an off mode, and that saves your battery life. An on mode, which will show you the meter in the viewfinder. I don't know if that's going to work. And a battery check, and that's just going to give it a beep. And it is very important that you have a charged battery, because this is an electronically controlled camera. You're not going to get the ability to take any photos or even advance your winder when there's no battery in it. It takes SR44s, they're not super expensive, and they do last a long while. I'm yet to replace mine. The other control on the camera is up here. We have this rewind lever, and it does slightly trick you because when it's vertical and pointing at R, that actually means that the tension is engaged. If I turn it sideways like that, you can see now that this spool is engaged and it would rewind your film. I've actually got it empty at the moment, so I can show you how to load it, but that is important. There is one quirk with this camera that almost fooled me the first time I used it. I realized what had happened and I rewound my film back into the canister so I could reload it, but I'll show you it now. Because this meter is automatic, what happens if you put the lens cap on whilst you're loading film is that you can load your film and you can wind twice per exposure. That means that your frame counter will be off and you'll actually, instead of burning 2 frames at the start of your roll, you'll burn 3 or 4. I'll show you that now. If I put this on auto mode, which is what you'll be shooting at 99% of the time, and just hypothetically, let's say I open the camera, I'm just doing that to reset my frame counter actually. So I load my film and I close it. What happens if I leave this on is that I wind once, I press the shutter, but if you can hear, the shutter's still open and it's trying to do a really long exposure. It's just closed, but if I do that again for the second one, imagine I'm loading this film in a hurry. I click once, I wind, I wind, I wind. Because the shutter is still open, the camera has just let me wind 3 frames without actually closing and ticking off my frame counter. That was the sound of the shutter closing, so that is a good, probably a 4 to 8 second exposure that was. It might sound like I'm making a fuss about it, but if you're shooting an expensive film, that's not something you want to happen. The workaround is to take the shutter, take the lens cap off whenever you start the roll and just fire your shots facing at a light source. I mean, it doesn't have to be super fast, it just has to be fast enough that you're getting your full 2 curtains each time. I've only had it for a couple of weeks. I took it to Budapest and I'll share some pictures from that in a second, but the lens is great. It's the standard 50mm that essentially all of the SLRs from the 70s and 80s came with.
So this is one of the pictures from my trip to Budapest. It wasn't a photography trip. I mean, I was out with my friends. It's actually my my friend Con's bachelor party. Here's the bridge in Budapest as Szabadság híd. I'm sure my pronunciation's awful. We went to the baths and it's one of those cameras you can just sling over a shoulder. I didn't take an extra lens, I didn't have a flash, I just had this, a couple of extra rolls of film, and you can see that it's one of those great kind of, I guess, yeah, back to the pocket sort of point and shoot kind of thing. You can just keep it with you and record things you see. This is at the Gillette baths. We were there quite early in the morning and there was this aerobics class going on. The lens, the 50mm 1.8, is a great performer, but its main differentiation is really against those point and shoot lenses. Here you can see a little bit of selective focus with the Hungarian beers, and it's lovely in that kind of nostalgic sense. I mean, it takes you back to 80s holiday snaps. Here's my friend Con looking a bit worse for wear, and as you can see, it does have that beautiful selective focus with the 51.8. It just brings your subject out of the background, and try finding a point and shoot that can do that.
Just so you can come away from this video feeling confident and prepared to shoot it, I'm going to show you the loading procedure. So, like most SLRs of this era, flip up the rewind spool and pull on it, and that opens this back door. Now, I'm going to load it with some Superior 200. This is actually the same film that I shot those pictures you've just seen on, so if you like those, pick some of this up. What you do is seat it in here. You can push that down so it kind of holds it in, but what I'm taking is this bit of the leader and I'm going to stab it into one of these ports on the take-up spool. Now give it a little wiggle, and now that it's in there, what I can do is start to advance my film. As I said before, you do want to make sure the shutter both opens and closes while you're doing that. And you can see that the camera is pulling it across. There are 2 little sprocket holes and I can see the teeth as they advance the film. Once you see the back of it like that, you can be pretty confident that you've loaded it correctly. So I'm going to close my door, shut the spool off, and that's now ready to shoot after 2 frame advances. Here we go. My frame counter up here says 0, or it's actually not 0, it's just a little dot before 1, which is 0. That's ready to go, and I can be pretty confident that I get my 24 shots. Whilst I'm here, I'll show you the rewind as well. So imagine that I've just taken 24 photos, I'm at the end of my roll, and what I'll do is I'll take this tension knob here. If I put that closer, you can get a better look, and I'm going to turn this to the side. And when that is horizontal, I'm ready to start winding my film back. Obviously, I've only taken one shot, so I'm gonna just feel it gently until it comes off the take-up spool, which it's just done. So I'm only doing that so that I can shoot it again. But you reround your film and just keep spinning this round and round until there's no tension. Once you've done that, pop the top up and out comes your film. I left a bit of leader on it just because this hasn't been shot, but when you do it, you want to wind it until no film is exposed, because any film that's outside the tank obviously will be destroyed, and that's not good. Okay, well, thanks for watching. If this camera sounds interesting to you, I can only recommend it. People fetishize manual exposure or full manual controls too much, but if you're one of those people that just wants to get on with shooting and you're not caught up in exactly what shutter speed you want to use, get one of these, trust its meter and treat it like a point and shoot. I mean, imagine a point and shoot with interchangeable lenses that costs less than most of the popular ones. Stuff like the Olympus Muji or the Contact series, they're so expensive, and this gives you a similar look, but you can have more selective focus. It's more reliable in the sense that there's no kind of fly-by-wire autofocus and mishaps like that. I really enjoy it. I think that it's a great camera for people who are just starting out with film photography, and yeah, if you find one for a good price, it could be a really, really great purchase. Thanks very much for watching. Like and subscribe, all that usual stuff, and I'll try and do another video next week. Currently at the top of my list is instant meters, spot meters, and the kind of differences between that. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. Otherwise, thanks for watching.